The crimson sun of Kepler 442b cast long shadows across the bioengineered pastures where Marcus Kane tended his hybrid cattle. 3 years had passed since he'd spoken to another human being, and the silence suited him fine. The cattle part, earth bovine, part native Keplerian herbivore, grazed peacefully on the purple grass that grew in neat rows between the sacred stone, circles the Shokari had erected centuries ago. Marcus respected those circles. Unlike the other human settlers, who'd been driven off or killed during the border wars, he'd learned to read the subtle markers the aliens left behind. The twisted metal sculptures weren't just art, they were warnings, boundaries, prayers carved in alloy and stone. When other ranchers had bulldozed through them to expand their grazing lands, the Shakari had responded with swift, silent justice. Marcus had watched the smoke rise from burning homesteads while he sat on his porch, untouched and unmolested. His own family hadn't been so lucky. Sarah and little Emma had been caught in the crossfire during the Meridian Station massacre. The memory still haunted his dreams. Sarah's last transmission crackling through static as the Shakari warships descended like silver wasps. "Tell Emma I love her," she'd whispered before the line went dead dot. Now Marcus lived alone in a prefab shelter that had seen better decades, surrounded by rolling hills dotted with the gentle giants he'd learned to call friends. The cattle understood him in ways humans never had. They didn't judge his past or demand explanations for his choices. They simply existed, bridging two worlds in their very DNA. The morning started like any other until he spotted the dust cloud on the horizon. 3 figures approached on foot, moving with the fluid grace that marked them as Shakari. Marcus set down his repair tools and watched them approach, his hand instinctively moving to the plasma rifle mounted beside his door. Not out of aggression, he'd learned long ago that weapons were useless against beings who could manipulate electromagnetic fields with their thoughts, but from old habits that died hard. The lead figure was massive, even for a Shakari, nearly 8 feet tall, with the characteristic elongated limbs and silver-blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the alien sunlight. Intricate biomechanical augmentations traced patterns across his chest and arms, marking him as someone of high rank. Behind him walked 2 smaller figures, their faces hidden beneath traditional ceremonial masks. As they drew closer, Marcus recognized the leader, Chief Veltar of the Northern Territories, the same alien who had ordered the destruction of half the human settlements in this sector, the same being whose warriors had killed Sarah and Emma. The chief raised one forefingered hand in the traditional gesture of peaceful approach. When he spoke, his voice carried the harmonic undertones that made Shakari speech sound like music played through crystal wind chimes. "Marcus Kane of the 3rd Terran Colony," Veltar said, stopping exactly 10 paces from the porch, the precise distance required by ancient diplomatic protocol. "I come with a request that may seem impossible. I come seeking not conquest or retribution, but knowledge." Marcus found his voice after several long moments. "You've got some nerve showing up here, Chief." "Indeed. But necessity often requires us to swallow our pride." The chief gestured to the 2 figures behind him. "I bring my daughters, Zara and Kessara, the last fertile females of our bloodline. Our traditional ways, our harmony with the cosmic flows, our spiritual connection to the world song, none of it is enough anymore. The galaxy is changing, and we must change with it or face extinction." The 2 young Shakari removed their masks, revealing faces that were hauntingly beautiful in their alien symmetry. One had the traditional silver-blue skin of her father, while the other's pigmentation had shifted to a deeper azure, marking her as a rare genetic variant. "I have watched you, human," Veltar continued. "You alone among your species learned to coexist with our sacred sites. You found a way to thrive without destroying. Your cattle bridge two worlds in their very existence, as you have learned to bridge the gap between respect and survival. This is what my daughters must learn, not just to preserve our culture, but to transform it. Marcus stared at the trio, memories of burning settlements, warring with the desperate hope he saw in the chief's ancient eyes. The weight of 3 years' solitude suddenly felt crushing as he realized his quiet life was about to end forever. What exactly are you asking me to do? Teach them to be human, Beltar replied. Teach them your beautiful recklessness, your stubborn refusal to accept defeat, your ability to adapt and survive against impossible odds. Help them become the bridge our people need to cross into tomorrow. The first lesson began at dawn with Marcus showing the Jacari sisters how to repair a broken fence post, a mundane task that would have normally taken him 15 minutes alone. With 2 aliens who had never held human tools, it stretched into 3 hours of patient instruction, broken communications, and increasing frustration on all sides. Zara, the elder sister with traditional silver-blue skin, approached every task with mathematical precision. She would study the tools for long minutes, running calculations in her head before making a single movement. Her sister Kessara, the azure-skinned variant, seemed to understand the work intuitively, but struggled with the crude simplicity of human engineering. Your species builds things to break, Kessara observed, her voice carrying the melodic tones common to her people, but tinged with genuine confusion. This metal post will corrode. This wire will snap. Why not grow a living fence that repairs itself? Marcus paused in his hammering, suddenly aware of how primitive his methods must seem to beings who could literally sing matter into new configurations. Because sometimes the simple solution is the right one. Your living fences are beautiful, but they take months to establish and years to mature. When winter storms hit or predators attack, you need something that can be fixed fast and cheap. Fast and cheap, Zara repeated, as if testing foreign words on her tongue. These are human concepts we must master, among others. Marcus set down his hammer and looked at both sisters seriously. Your father wants you to learn human resilience, but that comes from understanding human limitations. We don't live as long as you do. We can't manipulate energy fields with our minds. We can't commune with the planet's ecosystem directly. So we compensate with speed, adaptability, and what you might call creative desperation. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Mornings were spent on practical skills, equipment maintenance, resource management, emergency repairs. Afternoons focused on what Marcus called human philosophy, the art of making quick decisions with incomplete information, the value of calculated risks, the necessity of backup plans for backup plans. The sisters proved to be remarkably fast learners, but their different approaches created fascinating contrasts. Zara approached each lesson like a complex equation to be solved, while Kessara seemed to absorb knowledge through some form of osmosis that Marcus couldn't begin to understand. The breakthrough came during their 3rd week, when a pack of indigenous predators, 6-legged hunters the size of earth lions, threatened the cattle herd. Marcus had been teaching the sisters about defensive strategies when the attack began. Traditional Jacari response would have been to use harmonic frequencies to calm the predators while slowly herding the cattle to safety, a process that would take hours and likely result in the loss of several animals to the inevitable stragglers who couldn't keep up. Instead, Kessara grabbed the emergency flare gun Marcus had been explaining and fired 3 bright projectiles into the air above the predator pack. The sudden light and noise scattered them instantly, sending them fleeing back toward the forest. Crude but effective, she said with what Marcus was learning to recognize as Jacari humor. Sometimes the simple solution is the right one. That evening, as they sat around a fire made from actual burning wood instead of the energy-efficient Thermal fields the Shakari typically used. Zara asked a question Marcus had been dreading. Tell us about your family, about the ones you lost. Marcus stared into the flames, watching the orange tongues dance against the alien stars. What makes you think I lost anyone? Because you live like someone carrying ghosts, Cassara said. Softly, we can sense the weight of unfinished grief in your bio-emotional field. Your father told us what happened during the border wars, but we need to understand how loss shapes human behavior. For a long moment, Marcus considered walking away, ending this strange arrangement and returning to his comfortable solitude. But something in their eyes, not pity, but genuine curiosity, made him stay. Her name was Sarah, he began, his voice rough with disuse. My wife, and Emma was our daughter. She would have been 7 this year. He paused, gathering strength. They died when your people destroyed Meridian Station, caught in crossfire during what your military called a precision strike. Neither sister flinched at the accusation, but he saw something shift in their expressions. We're sorry, Zara said simply. But we need to understand, how does this loss inform your survival strategies? The question was so clinically delivered that Marcus almost laughed. It doesn't. That's the point. Sometimes humans don't survive. Loss, we just keep moving because stopping means facing the pain. We call it stubborn, but it's really just another form of fear. And yet you chose to stay here, among the reminders, Cassara observed, among our sacred sites and our people's energy signatures. Maybe I'm punishing myself. Maybe I'm trying to understand what happened. Or maybe, he looked at both sisters, maybe I'm waiting for a reason to stop carrying those ghosts around. The fire crackled between them as 3 unlikely companions shared the weight of unspoken truths under alien stars. Part 3. The Nature of Power. The 4th week brought an unexpected visitor that would test everything the sisters had learned about human adaptability. Marcus was teaching them advanced problem-solving techniques when a sleek Shakari transport craft descended from the pale green sky, its biomechanical surfaces rippling like liquid metal. From the craft emerged a figure that made both sisters instinctively step backward. Commander Thelvis, the military leader whose forces had been responsible for the systematic destruction of human settlements during the border wars. Unlike Chief Veltar's ceremonial augmentations, Thelvis wore combat modifications that made him appear more machine than organic being. Veltar's daughters learning to play in the dirt with primitives, Thelvis observed, his harmonic voice carrying undertones of disdain. How the mighty have fallen. Marcus felt his hand drift toward his sidearm, but Cassara stepped forward, her azure skin darkening to deep indigo, a color shift Marcus had never seen before. Commander, she said, her voice carrying new harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate. You are not invited to this place. I was invited by duty, Thelvis replied. When the chief's daughters abandon their sacred training to consort with the enemy, it becomes a matter of planetary security. Enemy? Zara's mathematical precision was replaced by something sharper. This human has shown more respect for our sacred sites than many of our own people. He has learned to coexist without conquest. Thelvis turned his attention to Marcus, with the kind of stare that could freeze plasma. The same human whose species destroyed 3 of our holy sites during their expansion. The same human whose military killed thousands of our people before we were forced to respond. Marcus had faced death before, but there was something uniquely terrifying about being examined by a being who could kill him with a thought. Still, weeks of teaching had given him new perspective on Shakari psychology. You're right, Marcus said, surprising everyone present. My species did terrible things, but so did yours. The question isn't who started it, it's whether we're smart enough to stop repeating the same mistakes. The commander's biomechanical augmentations began to glow with stored energy. Wisdom from a primitive. How refreshing. That's when Kesara did something that changed everything. Instead of backing down or appealing to tradition, she stepped between Marcus and the commander and did something Marcus had never seen a Jacari do. She raised her voice. Enough! The word carried such harmonic force that the nearby cattle stopped grazing and turned to look. You speak of duty and honor while demonstrating neither. This human has shown us survival techniques that could save our entire species. And you respond with the same rigid thinking that brought us to the edge of extinction. Felva seemed genuinely shocked. You dare challenge military authority? I challenge stupidity in any form it takes, Kesara shot back, her skin now cycling through colors. Marcus had never seen deep purples and burning oranges that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. We are the last fertile females of our bloodline. Our children will inherit whatever future we create. Should we birth them into a world where ancient grudges matter more than survival? Zara joined her sister, her own skin beginning to shift colors. The human way is not about conquest, it's about adaptation. They don't cling to pure bloodlines or perfect traditions. They change, they grow, they become whatever they need to become to survive. For a moment, Marcus thought the commander might actually attack. The air around them began to smell of ozone as electromagnetic fields built to dangerous levels. Then something unexpected happened. Felvas began to laugh. It wasn't human laughter, but the Jacari equivalent, a complex series of harmonic notes that sounded like crystal wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Veltar was right, he said finally. They have learned the human way, including the beautiful recklessness of challenging superior force with nothing but conviction. The energy fields dissipated as quickly as they had built. Continue your lessons, the commander said, his tone now carrying grudging respect. But know that others are watching. Not all of our people will be us, understanding as I have chosen to be today. As his transport lifted back into the sky, Marcus turned to find both sisters, staring at him with expressions he was learning to read as satisfaction mixed with surprise. We defended you, Zara observed with something like wonder in her voice. With human-style aggression and stubbornness, Kesara added, her skin slowly returning to its normal azure shade. Yeah, well, Marcus said, still shaking from the encounter. Sometimes that's exactly what the situation calls for. A trick is knowing when to fight and when to back down. And how do humans learn the difference? Marcus looked out at his hybrid. Cattle, peacefully grazing despite the recent trauma. Practice. Lots of practice, and enough mistakes to teach you the cost of getting it wrong. That evening, as they prepared dinner, using a combination of human efficiency and Jacari bioengineering, Marcus realized something had fundamentally changed. The sisters weren't just learning human techniques. They were developing their own hybrid approach to problem solving, combining the best of both species while creating something entirely new. The bridge between worlds wasn't just being built, it was learning to defend itself. Part 4. The Test of Synthesis. The revelation came during their 6th week together, delivered by Chief Veltar himself during what should have been a routine progress evaluation. The three had gathered around Marcus's kitchen table, a piece of furniture the sisters had initially found baffling, but now used for everything from meal planning to strategic discussions. There is something I have not told you, the chief began, his harmonic voice carrying undertones of regret. The threat to our species is not merely cultural extinction. Our homeworld is dying. Marcus set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. Define dying. The bioneural networks that regulate our planet's ecosystem are failing. For millennia, they have maintained the delicate balance that allows our civilization to thrive. But the networks are organic constructs, and like all living things, they have lifespans. Veltar's skin shifted to deeper blue shades that Marcus had learned to associate with profound sadness. Our scientists estimate We have perhaps 50 years before total system collapse. Zara's mathematical mind immediately grasped the implications. 50 years to relocate our entire population. But the traditional sites our people require for spiritual and physical health exist only on our homeworld. Unless, Kisara said, slowly, we learn to create new traditions. New methods of maintaining cultural identity that aren't tied to specific geographical features. Marcus felt the weight of understanding settle on his shoulders like a lead blanket. That's why you really brought them here. Not just to learn human adaptability, but to figure out how to transplant an entire civilization. Precisely. And you have succeeded beyond my hopes. The chief gestured to his daughters, whose skin patterns had begun exhibiting new color combinations that Marcus now recognized as signs of hybrid thinking, neither purely Jacori nor human, but something new. Entirely. They have learned to synthesize approaches, to create solutions that neither species could develop alone. The proof came the next day when a genuine crisis tested their newfound abilities. A massive storm system, the kind that occurred every few years on Kepler 442b, approached from the western desert. Traditional Jacari weather management would have involved complex harmonic adjustments to atmospheric pressure, a process that took days of preparation and required multiple individuals working in perfect synchronization. Human approach would have been to simply hunker down and ride it out, accepting whatever damage occurred and rebuilding afterward. Instead, the sisters proposed something unprecedented, a rapid deployment shelter system that combined human, quick construction techniques with Jacari bioengineering. Working with materials from both cultures, they designed temporary structures that could be assembled in hours rather than days, while incorporating living components that would actually strengthen during the storm rather than merely enduring. The construction process became a masterclass in hybrid problem solving. Marcus provided expertise in structural engineering and resource management, while the sisters contributed biological integration and energy field manipulation. What emerged was unlike anything any of the three species had created before. Shelters that looked like they had been grown rather than built, yet could be erected with the speed human survival required. When the storm hit, the results exceeded everyone's expectations. The hybrid shelters not only protected the cattle, but actually converted the storm's electrical energy into usable power for the ranch systems. Marcus watched in amazement as bioluminescent panels glowed brighter with each lightning strike, storing energy that would last for weeks after the storm passed. We're not just learning to survive, Kasara observed as they watched the light show from inside the main shelter. We're learning to thrive by transforming challenges into advantages. Very human concept. Zara agreed with what Marcus was learning to recognize as Jacari humor. Take something that should destroy you and find a way to make you stronger. But their success attracted attention from unexpected quarters. As the storm cleared, Marcus spotted multiple aircraft approaching from different directions. Not just Jacari transports, but human military vessels as well. The first to land was a Terran Federation shuttle bearing the insignia of Colonial Command. From it emerged Captain Sarah Chun, a woman whose bearing screamed career military despite her diplomatic uniform. Marcus Kane, she said, her voice carrying the clipped efficiency of someone accustomed to being obeyed. You're a hard man to find. I wasn't hiding. No, but you weren't exactly sending regular reports either. Colonial Command has been monitoring unusual energy signatures from this sector. Imagine our surprise when we traced them to a supposedly inactive homestead. Her eyes moved to the sisters, who had positioned themselves on either side of Marcus with protective instincts that were purely human in their intensity. Before Marcus could respond, the Jacari transports landed, disgorging a delegation led by Commander Thelvis and several other military figures Marcus didn't recognize. An interesting gathering, Thelvis observed, his augmentations beginning their familiar energy buildup. Human military consulting with colonial deserters and royal daughters learning primitive survival techniques. Captain Chun's hand moved toward her sidearm. Commander, I trust this isn't going to become an incident. That depends entirely on what your colonial deserter has been teaching our future leaders. Marcus felt the familiar sensation of being caught between forces beyond his control, but this time something was different. This time he wasn't alone. Maybe, Cassara said, stepping forward with confidence that reminded Marcus of her confrontation with Thelva's weeks earlier. You should ask what we've been teaching each other. She gestured to the storm-powered shelters around them, to the hybrid cattle grazing peacefully despite the recent chaos, to the garden where human vegetables grew, alongside shikari biofruits in impossible harmony. We haven't been learning to be human or shikari, Zara added, her skin cycling through colors that somehow seemed to include human emotional states. We've been learning to be something new, something that takes the best from all worlds. Captain Chun and Commander Thelvas exchanged the kind of look that Marcus recognized from his military days, the expression of career officers realizing that the situation had just become far more complicated than their briefings had suggested. The bridge between worlds was about to face its greatest test yet. Part 5. The New Horizons standoff lasted exactly 37 minutes by Marcus's count, during which time representatives from 3 species engaged in the kind of careful diplomatic posturing that had preceded most of the galaxy's recent wars. Then Cassara did something that changed the trajectory of interstellar politics forever. She started cooking. This is absurd, she announced, her skin shifting to the bright gold patterns that Marcus had learned indicated decisive action. We're standing around posturing about the future while ignoring basic hospitality. Captain Chun, Commander Thelvas, you will join us for a meal. Everyone else can maintain their security perimeters, but the actual decision-makers are going to sit down and eat like civilized beings. Captain Chun looked like she wanted to object, but the delicious aromas already emerging from the hybrid cooking system made her stomach audibly growl. Commander Thelvas seemed equally torn between military protocol and curiosity about what the sisters had learned to create. The meal that followed became legendary in diplomatic circles for years. Afterward, using ingredients from 3 worlds and cooking techniques that blended human efficiency with shikari bioharmony, the sisters created dishes that shouldn't have been possible. Fusion cuisine that somehow satisfied the nutritional and cultural requirements of multiple species while tasting better than anything any of them had experienced before. As they ate, barriers began to dissolve. Captain Chun learned that the shikari weren't planning conquest, but were facing potential extinction. Commander Thelvas discovered that human adaptability wasn't just crude improvisation, but could be sophisticated problem-solving when properly directed. Marcus found himself mediating discussions between 2 military officers who had been enemies hours earlier. The traditional approach would be to establish separate colonies. Captain Chun mused over her 3rd helping of what Zara called harmony stew. Maintain species purity, avoid cultural contamination, which has worked so well historically. Thelvas replied with what Marcus was learning to interpret as shikari sarcasm. Perhaps it's time to consider alternatives. The alternative they ultimately developed would have been impossible without the foundation the sisters had built over their weeks of training. Instead of separate colonies or forced integration, they proposed something unprecedented: hybrid settlements, designed from the ground up to support multiple species while creating new cultural forms that honored all traditions. The first test site would be here, on Marcus's ranch, expanded to accommodate a small community of volunteers from both species. The sisters would serve as cultural interpreters and hybrid technology developers, while Marcus would coordinate the practical aspects of multi-species resource management. You realize, Captain Chun said, as the formal agreements were being drafted. This makes you the first official Terran Shikari ambassador in galactic history. Marcus looked out at his cattle, the hybrid creatures that had taught him to bridge two worlds in their very existence, and then at the sisters, who had become far more than students. They had become family, partners in creating something that had never existed before. "I've been a lot of things in my life," he said finally. "Soldier, rancher, hermit. I guess adding diplomat isn't that much stranger than the rest of it." The construction of New Harmony, as the settlement came to be known, took 8 months and required innovations that pushed both species' technologies in directions they had never considered. Human rapid construction techniques merged with Shikari bioengineering to create buildings that were literally alive, growing and adapting to their inhabitants' needs while maintaining the efficiency that human survival required. The first children born in New Harmony were something unprecedented, not human, not Shikari, but genetically stable hybrids who carried the best traits of both species. They could manipulate energy fields like their Shikari parents, while displaying the adaptability and creative problem-solving that defined human nature. Marcus often found himself watching these children play games that would have been impossible for either parent-species contests that required both harmonic manipulation and physical agility, puzzles that demanded both mathematical precision and intuitive leaps. They were living proof that the bridge between worlds hadn't just been built, it was reproducing itself. Years later, when New Harmony had grown from a small experimental settlement to a thriving city that served as the diplomatic capital for 3 sectors, Marcus would sit on his porch in the evenings and watch the sunset paint the sky in colors that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. The sacred stone circles still stood among the grazing lands, but now they were surrounded by hybrid gardens where children from multiple species learned together. Zara had become the settlement's chief technology coordinator, her mathematical mind perfectly suited to managing the complex systems that kept their multi-species society functioning. Kesara served as cultural liaison, and in her spare time had written what was becoming the standard text on interspecies psychology. Chief Veltar had retired from active leadership to become what he called a wisdom keeper, helping other Shikari communities adapt to the reality of diaspora living. Commander Thelvis had surprised everyone by requesting transfer to New Harmony's security force, where his military expertise proved invaluable in protecting the settlement from those who saw their success as a threat to species purity. Captain Chun had been promoted to admiral and now oversaw the Colonial Command's new Department of Interspecies Relations, a bureaucracy that existed entirely because a lonely cowboy had agreed to teach 2 alien princesses how to fix a fence. But the most important change was in Marcus himself. The ghosts he had carried for so long, Sarah and Emma, had finally found peace. Not because he had forgotten them, but because he had found a way to honor their memory by building the kind of future they would have wanted to see. As he sat on his porch on this particular evening, watching hybrid children chase hybrid butterflies through fields where 3 species crops grew in impossible harmony, Marcus Kane understood that sometimes the greatest adventures begin not with a call to action, but with a simple choice to let strangers into your life. The bridge between worlds had been built, but more importantly, it had become home to those who chose to cross it together. End of story. *.